Hi, in this video I'm going to review with you the agreement of sale. This is the standard agreement of sale, whether it be for the buyer or the seller. It's prepared by the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, and it's just a fill-in-the-blank agreement. So I'm going to go through each section and highlight some areas that you might want to look at when you're looking at an agreement of sale. Let's get started. Okay, here's the standard agreement of sale, and here we're going to start on page 1. You will see that's the standard agreement of sale. You've got the buyer information, seller information. Here we have the property information. This here is the information whoever's representing the buyer. In this case here we're representing the seller, but who would ever be representing the seller. Obviously, if we're representing the buyer, our information here would be up here. This here talks about dual agency, and your agent can explain that further to you. This agreement, this is the important page here. You have the date of the agreement, the purchase price written out. Here we have a first deposit of $5,000, a second deposit of $7,000, and all that the second deposit will be deposited within 3 days of satisfaction of an inspection contingency. This can vary based on the agreement. Sometimes it's a larger or smaller deposit. Sometimes there's only one, and a lot of times there is two. If we had any sellers assist, that would be in this section here, and this agreement is showing none. The settlement date this year is showing April 15th. It's telling us when the settlement date is going to be. This here is the date, response date for the buyer or the seller to respond, and here they have March 30th. It just means that all parties would agree to respond by that date. Otherwise, this agreement would be void. Here we have the fixtures included. Standard fixtures included are anything that you need a tool to remove from the house. So, example, if you have a shelf on the wall and you need a screwdriver or a pair of pliers to get that shelf off, that there would be considered a fixture. If you can just take it off the picture like off the wall like a picture, that would be considered personal property. And here we have included on top of the fixtures is a washer, dryer, refrigerator, which again, their personal property this here is included in the agreement of sale. In this one here, we do have a mortgage contingency. They're electing that. They need to get a loan amount of $213,000, 30-year conventional. They're putting 5% down, and this is the interest rate spread that they need to get that between. If they can't get a loan between these conditions, within these conditions, the buyer could walk away from the contract. They could void it and get their deposit money back. This here is what's called the mortgage commitment date, and they're saying by March 16th, whatever your date would be in here, would say that your mortgage commitment from the bank would come to you, whether it be if you're a buyer, you're going to need it by that date. If you're a seller, you're going to want to receive it by that date. And that's saying that the bank or mortgage company has reviewed all of the buyer's information and they're approving the loan based on some conditions. Now, if it has conditions like a appraisal condition, the buyer would then have 7 days usually to remove that condition. Otherwise, the seller could terminate. And the remainder of this just spells out that timeline. It does say here the buyer is in default if they furnish any false information to the buyer's financial institution, so they can't lie about anything. If it's an FHA loan, this here would apply. The buyer has any changes in their financial status, they must notify the seller of that change, like if they lost a job or something. This case here, it's talking that it's public water and public sewer. If it was an on-site well, it would be marked here, or if it was a septic system, be marked here, and these are just disclosures regarding that. These here are just some notices regarding the Open Space Act and conservation easement if your property were to be in one of those. This here talks about the real estate disclosure. And again, this in Pennsylvania, it's required that every seller fill out a real estate disclosure, and that's all this is saying here. Highway occupancy permit only applies if you're on a state highway. Internet of Things, this here just talks about if you have things such as a Wi-Fi, for example, thermostat, that you would disconnect that at the time of settlement. Waiver of contingencies just states that if the buyer waives any contingencies, they did have the right to do that. And then this goes into the buyer's due diligence. If they are doing inspections, it says that the seller will have all utilities on for those inspections, that the buyer does get 2 pre-settlement walkthroughs regardless of whether they're doing inspections or not. And then this here would show which inspections are electing or waiving. In this case here, this buyer is doing a home inspection, wood infestation, and radon, and they're waiving all the other inspections. They're going to do all those inspections within 10 days. And then at the end of that 10-day period, there's a 5-day negotiating period. And that 5-day negotiating period would be between the buyer and the seller to come up with any resolutions if the buyer is asking for any credit or repairs. If they cannot come to a resolution, normally you have 2 days, the buyer has 2 days to terminate or accept the property as is. because if they don't terminate, they're accepting the property as is. If they do terminate, they would get their deposit money back under the inspections or have the right to their deposit money back. This here talks about title, that the buyer is getting title free and clear of all liens is what that's saying here in this section. Notice of assessments, municipal requirements. If the township or borough where the house is being sold requires a use and occupancy permit, the seller is required to get that or obtain that. And it's saying here that if they don't do that, the buyer could walk away, or if there's things that the township or borough is requiring they do to get that permit, that if they choose not to do that, the buyer could walk away as well. If they do abide by that, the buyer would be continue to go to settlement. If it's in a homeowners association or condominium, these two boxes here would be marked, and it would state here that the seller will order what's called a resale package within 15 days, and once they get that, the buyer then has 5 days to review that resale package, which read the rules and regulations for the association and the budget and things, and within that 5-day period, they could terminate based on those that information. If they don't, they go to settlement. This here just talks about taxing real estate taxes and how the buyer can appeal those taxes if they like. Maintenance and risk of loss is on the seller up until the time of settlement. So this here just discusses if anything happens to the property from the time we go under contract to the time we go to settlement. Home warranties, this is just a notice for home warranties. Recording, this says that this document won't be recorded in the recorder of deeds of the specific county, so that way nobody knows what the seller accepted for the property if the deal were to fall through. Assignment states here that it's binding upon their personal heirs and representatives. Governing law just says that if this deal were to go to a lawsuit, that the lawsuit must occur within this jurisdiction where the contract is. They can't be sued out of state. 23 talks about the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act of 1980. 24, this just talks about convicted sex offenders. If the buyer would like to check, they can go to the Pennsylvania State Police website and see if there's any convicted sex offenders in the area they're buying the house. 25 is standard representations. 26 talks about the default. If the buyer or seller were to default, how that works. That deposit money will stay in an escrow account until both parties agree where it goes, and they must sign off on that. Or in this case here, if 30 days passes, sometimes 80 days, 180 days, or whatever might be written in here, if nothing happens, if neither party does anything, the buyer then could request their money back from the broker after that period, and they would return that money. If during that time period, either party, for example, whether your buyer or seller filed an action, that money would stay in the escrow account until each party agrees where it goes or an issuing authority made a decision on where that deposit money would go. This here is marked that the seller is only limited to retaining the sums paid by buyer, including deposit monies as liquidated damages, meaning they can't sue them for the full purchase price. They can only go after their deposit money. 27 states that all parties will agree to mediation before going to a court and filing a lawsuit. 28 is standard releases. 29 just states that if anyone does anything fraudulent in this transaction with the licensee, you could be entitled for money from the state by calling that number. Communication with buyer and seller, number 30, just says that you're communicating through your agents is almost the same as you communicating with each other. 31 just talks about the headings in the agreement, and the sections have no effect whatsoever in determining the rights, obligations, or intent of the parties. Special clauses here, there's no special clauses here. We did strike out an addendum clause here, but this one here could be marked as an appraisal. If there's an appraisal contingency or sale and settlement, nothing is marked here. And any additional terms would be written down here. This one here has that if any contingency due date falls on the weekend or bank holiday, it is automatically extended to the next available business day, because in the contract, days are counted regardless of whether they're holidays or weekend days. So this here is just extending those days so they don't have to deal with it on the weekend. And then you have here that the buyer received the following things they initialed, and then the signatures of each party. All right, so we've completed that. If you do have any other questions regarding your agreement of sale, you can reach out to us, but we just wanted to give you a quick overview on that before we actually give you a call and ask you if you do have any questions. Our phone number here is 215-918-1920. We look forward to getting you to the settlement table. Take care.